what's the common thing we hear from clients? A common thing we hear in industry, isn't it? It's not unique to joinery companies. I need better people. I just need better people.
Yeah, if only I could find good people.
Yeah, sometimes I think what's behind that statement, if I could just find more people like me. Sometimes it's a bit of projection, right? We think we're doing all this work, I just need people who care as much as me or work as hard as me, which is actually probably nothing further from the truth, right? I think it's a very, if you follow that thought, it'll only lead you to more frustration.
Absolutely. And it leads you to finding so many faults in who you currently have, and then who you're actually wanting to potentially hire in the future as well. Because it's like, well, if they're not like me, they're not going to work as hard as me. If you're not willing to take a hard look at yourself as well, because then you might have a lot of shortcomings and you just sort of not actually acknowledging them. It's really interesting that we hear that all the time. I just can't find good people.
Yeah. And the funny thing is like, I always say, but who hired the people you've got? Right. So we hired them, right? So we hired people that we now think are not good or not as good as we'd like. And I said, so when you hire the next person in the interview, they're always going to seem good, right? Unless there's really clear, obviously, red flags. Everyone can have a great resume. Everyone can tell you, I'm a hard worker. I've got good work ethic. I know how to build things. I know X, Y, Z. So it can be, you actually can't tell in an interview. You can only get a gauge of how the person comes across.
What are some of the things that you would recommend to our clients, or any joinery business for that matter, to sort of take note of or ask in the interview process, whether it is in the initial interview or multiple interviews on? What would you get them to take note of in order to understand, good people? What is actually good people?
That's a great question. I would actually steer away from even the term good person. I'd say what you're looking for is you're hiring. For me, what I've learned, I've had a lot of production manager roles or management roles in organizations, and a lot of that roles included hiring and firing, unfortunately. And what I learned probably after I've done this probably in the hundreds of times was you need to hire for attitude, not just knowledge. Now, there's some basic knowledge that, obviously need someone probably with a trade certificate if they're going to build joinery. But what I look for is a learning attitude. Someone who is willing and can demonstrate that they've have a lifelong learning approach. So they can talk about something they've learned recently. Could even be a hobby, a new instrument, but they are a constant learner. They like to learn, and they can talk about their process of how they go about learning something. Because when I'm hiring, and if I'm in a company that wants to deploy new processes that we haven't understood yet or we haven't deployed yet, one of the part of the role is, yes, you're going to be building things and running machines, but we're also going to be implementing new things, which we're going to require some learning. And if that person is hasn't learned anything for 20 years and has just done what they've always done, they're going to find that a struggle when they go into that environment where now we're trying to do something new. And the last time they did something new was, 10 years ago. It's going to be stressful. It's going to be difficult. Regarding the skills in the job, as long as they've got the basic skills and can perform the work that we currently do, everything else can be learned. Everything else can be learned. So I'm very cognizant to tease out of someone in the interview process is, share some experiences you've had around something you've learned recently in your life. Could even be a book you read that made you rethink about certain things. Could be an instrument you've learned to play. Could be a new sport you took up. And because what I'm looking for is, okay, what motivates someone to learn, and how do they go through the learning? How easy do they give up? How do they move through that process of learning?
And typically learned about themselves recently. That's also really
right. That's also a great one. Yeah. How aware are they of their
awareness?
Yeah, exactly right. Yes, because if these are basic requirements for any good team member.
Yes.
And then I can expect that when I hire them, because I know that they're okay with learning new things. So when we talk about a new process or a new problem we've got to solve, and there's learning required to understand that problem, then I know that that's a person that will enjoy that, will actually move towards that, not resist and move away. In fact, the companies that are, already lifelong lean companies, in the 10, 20, 30 years, this is what they emphasize at the hiring process. We will teach you our processes on how to do things when you come. What we're interested in is your attitude and your learning capability. Because if you hire for attitude and learning capability, the rest, they will learn everything else once they join your company. But if you hire someone who says, I've got 20 years experience, I know how to build every bit of joinery, they're going to come in and tell you how to build joinery. They're not going to want to follow your process.
Tell you how to run a business, tell
yeah,
you how to run your business specifically.
Yes, and they're going to use the past to create something in your business. And we're not about using the past. We're about creating the new way and the future way to do things that we've never done before. So bringing someone that's going to bring methods and techniques from 15 years ago, even if they're really good, and they're going to be very hard and fast about that, that's probably not the right person for a company that's going around implementing new processes across the business. The other aspect about that, Tiff, is when people hire people, part of the job in a process-based business is to understand their capabilities and to build those capabilities up.
Yes.
Using a simple tool like a skills matrix or something like that. So if we're not thinking about developing our people, then we're certainly going to hire the wrong ones, because we want someone who's already developed, right? Who we think has already got all this perfect package that we know doesn't exist out there. Even if you're lucky enough to find the odd person that seems like the perfect package, you won't find another one very quickly. They're not, they're not common. And typically they come with higher expectations, because they've already been through a lot of learning, been through a lot of change or implementation. So another thing I caution companies when you're hiring, don't tell people we've got this wonderful business with great processes and blah, 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 if you don't have them in place yet. Because if you do attract in someone who says, great, I can operate really well in that environment and I can help you further those processes, but then they get into the business and they go, wait a minute, you're still at step one of all this stuff. You haven't actually implemented anything yet. They're going to get a bit of a shock, and then there's maybe a bit of trust broken because, wait a minute, you said this at the interview, but now I'm in the environment, I've been here for a month, I can see you actually don't know that we're nowhere near that yet. And there's a bit of
doesn't that happen so often,
Well,
this is the vision, but and this is how we do things, and then there's a real disconnect between what's going on in the actual business in the day-to-day to what you've said to that potential employee.
It's almost like we're trying to sell the job to them, aren't we, rather than being authentic and genuine around the challenge that role will have to take on, which is implementing change in the business and driving good teamwork and all that kind of stuff. It's another part of that development is when we think about developing new employees, or we've got to also develop the existing employees. So back to the phrase of I need good people, I would like people to rethink that phrase and go, I need to develop good people. In my existing team, they're all actually good people. They've all got good intention because they come to work every day, even with the problems, even with the headaches. They still turn up every day and they do an honest day's work. My job is actually as a leader of a company or a business or an area to then work out, well, what skills do they need? What development do they need? And it's not a cookie cutter problem. You may need specific development for individuals, or there might be a broad team development aspect that you can do. But again, back to those simple tools like a skills matrix.
Yes.
Doing a bit of a gap assessment on what do the team already know. You might find that when you spend that time with them, 3 or 4 of them have some great experience from other companies or outside of work that can be useful for some of the challenges that are ahead. But I often find, we hire someone, hey, there's the bench, off you go, start working. And we don't really spend that time to connect about the package you've hired and unpack it and see what's really there.
I like this word connection, or to connect with your either newly hired team members or the team members that you've had. If you don't build that relationship with them with the intention to nurture, and I always like to use the word nurture, you will lose team members and you will have that mentality of, oh, I can't find good people, another person has left. It won't build a sense of loyalty. One of the things that we can, also do is make our team members the hero of the company as well. Say to them, okay, well, first of all, as a team member, what do you need? What would you like to learn more about? Obviously, having that skills matrix that you mentioned in mind, knowing where the team needs to be developed. So not just relying on that information and that opinion from the team members. But then also saying to them, what are you really good at? What do you feel that you can train others on? How can you lead the training?
Yes.
To give you an example, we do practice what we preach at the Joinery Coach and the Marketing Joint. We have a wonderful team of content creators. And as you know, there is AI is a relatively new thing that's developed over the last 12 to 18 months, I would say, ChatGPT. And one of our team members ran a workshop on how to effectively use ChatGPT to create content and then edit it further down to be really specific, to our clients. So it's about using the tools that you have rather than, doing things from scratch. So using those team members, saying, what is it? What can you offer to the team? How can you better skill them? Because it's going to actually probably land even more, like better and more authentically coming from a fellow team member than it would coming from the top and training from the top.
Yes, I love that concept, because I always say the best person to teach is someone who's just learned.
Yes.
Because often the person who's the expert, they lose that ability to have the common language and the fresh memory of, oh yeah, when I was trying to work that out, or when I tried to understand that, I had this problem, or this is what I did to, this helped me. So it's fresh in the learner's mind. It's just that. Plus, they're normally pretty proud or happy that they've just developed this new skill, and they're very excited, very positive about sharing it with someone else. So yes, I love that concept of taking someone in the team who's keen to develop themselves and then making them the person that trains the next person. Works really, really well. Actually, you tapped into one of the things that Toyota do. That's how they develop their team, exactly like that. They always use the new learner to go and lead the next improvement event, so he can share what he's just learned with the team, and they're always super enthusiastic about it.
Incredible advocates for continuous improvement, Toyota.
Yes, indeed. Well, they're kind of the ones that birthed a lot of the concepts, back a long time ago now. But yes, it's always good to look at people who are further ahead on that journey and take some of that learnings back into people who are just starting on that journey. So yes, developing people, absolutely. I'm just making a kind of bit of a thread here. I'm thinking, so if you think about like the order of things that need to happen is like connect first.
Yes.
Spend time, get to know your team. Then assess them, assess what they need for the things you want them to learn or do differently. New processes, new ways of getting together in a team meeting and doing problem solving, whatever those things are. And then have a think about, okay, what are the things I need to put on that development plan to get them to a point where they can do this really well? And the last thing, obviously, the most important thing with any team that's working through change, reward and recognition. It's so important. And it doesn't need to be, sometimes people think it needs to be the barbecues and the money or the tickets to the cinema. Yes, those are good, but they're kind of like, I say they're kind of like trinkets, because genuine words around people applying effort, not just results, means so much. And we can all probably relate to something in our own lives where someone we've admired or respected, whether it's in family, work, or a group outside of work, when they've said a few key words when we've done something or made some effort on something or actually delivered a result on something or learned something new, they can float you. Those few words can float you for a couple of weeks. That feeling it gives you, that motivation to keep going. And this is something I try and impress on business owners or leaders of a work group is it's actually not hard reward and recognition. And probably you're overthinking it. You just need to be present at the right time and have a few kind words at the right moment. And that will be more than enough to carry the team through to keep going. And they'll all go home and talk about it with their families. Hey, the boss said this to me today. My wife comes home regularly with things when the boss has given her feedback. And she's buzzing for like 2 or 3 days on that. I wish I could have the same effects on her, but not always possible. Sometimes yes, but not all the time. But I can certainly see how it really carries her through, even through some of the challenging times. So yes, I think, connect, develop, or understand what's needed for development, and then recognize and reward. And I would say recognize effort in learning. So they might not have become experts yet or delivered the result you want yet, but you can see they're giving it a really good go, And then through this process, you actually realize you do have good people. You don't need to go and find, it's more effort to go and find someone, put the job out, do the interviews, read the resumes, than it is to actually go, because if you add up the hours you're doing to do that, and you go, well, if I spent those 9 hours, like 1 hour a day going developing someone out on the floor or someone in the office, what could I do in 9 hours of developing someone? You can do an awful lot if you break it down to a structure of a process of how to approach that, as opposed to just getting the next person in, maybe waiting 3 or 4 months and realizing, oh, maybe they're not the right hire. And then this endless wheel of, stress, actually, looking for something that is like a unicorn, right? It's like, terms used a lot. Something that you really are rolling the dice and just hoping you're going to find this magic person.
Massive financial burden to do that as well.
Yeah, I haven't even talked about the cost.
The hire process, because it's not just the financial burden of maybe looking at a HR expert or recruitment agency, or even just putting an ad out there and putting money behind it. The financial burden is actually your time, that it's taking you away from leading your team, from doing the work, from speaking to clients, from working on your business. That is a massive financial cost at the end of the day. It's time is money.
Yes, indeed. Sometimes I think about metrics that people can look at to get them thinking differently about the problem, because sometimes we don't realize how many times we're in that process of rehiring someone, and maybe we've gone through 5 or 6 people already, and so maybe looking at like how many people have left the business over the last year or so, and what does that revolving door look like, and how do we stop that revolving door of this cycle of bringing someone in, having an opinion that after a time they're maybe not good enough, and then maybe starting that cycle again, because something that really happens is, as like we talked earlier, when someone joins a company, if we're setting the wrong expectations and painting this really beautiful picture, and they get in and there's still some firefighting and chaos going on, that's an immediate separation of expectations. And I remember reading a study once done by a guy called James Adonis, who's an Australian. He was doing a PhD study around, he called it workplace enragement, which is a good play on words, right? Workplace engagement. He said, no, workplace enragement. So what causes this? And one of the things he'd studied was what happens after job interviews. And he says most people that leave a job within 6 months of starting it, he goes, it's the implicit, the clear expectations and the unclear expectations that are set in the interview. He says they walk away from the interview thinking, this is a great job, I've made the right decision. They painted such a great picture. The website looks great, and then they get in there and it's like, this is not the picture I had in my mind. And it only takes a couple of months to really, feel the environment and the culture that's there.
Yeah.
And then the separation starts to occur, the disappointment in the employee and the disappointment in the employer.
Yes.
But what's really happening is we didn't paint the honest picture and tell them what the true challenges were for the job. We can still paint that in a positive way. It doesn't need to be a negative or a doom and gloom discussion at the interview. But it needs to be authentic and genuine about the challenges in the business and what the expectations are. And then typically when you hire someone, you want to have pretty good check-in for the first few weeks to make sure those expectations.
Onboarding. Wow.
Yeah, the onboarding is so important.
Massive thing that a lot of people, especially I would say more smaller joinery businesses, don't really have in place, like an onboarding process. Yes. What, a quality onboarding process look like for our industry?
Yeah. And in fact, it goes back to those kind of 3 steps, right? Connect, how do I connect and turn that into a process? What's the process of connection? And it starts at the interview, right? It really does start there. Process of understanding, what skills that person will need to be successful in the role. That starts within the first 4 weeks of the person hitting the ground, as you start to see what they understand and what they don't understand. And then that development is, that ongoing plan around the training matrix or the skills needed or external courses and whatever that content might be, to get them to fully understand how to do the changes or how to implement new processes in the work aspect. Yeah, I think it's kind of like you know, the traditional process is I need to find the better person and just keep going through this routine of revolving door. And we go, no, you actually need to create a process to make sure the person you're bringing in is successful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really the company's job to ensure that process is there, not to expect you've hired a hero who'll just muscle through all those problems and do great work, because ultimately people reflect the environment. So you can hire actually someone really, really, really good. In fact, probably a lot of people who are still in the mindset of the revolving door, kind of finding the perfect person, probably have let go, out of the last 10 hires, have probably let go 7 really great people. And it's just they never got to be great because the environment wasn't what they expected and had a number of things that stopped them being able to be successful, such as the things we're talking about, like a good onboarding plan, good development plan, support in the role in the first 3 months so they can master it, you know.
You mentioned,
because that's really what makes a good person. That's what makes a good employee. Those steps actually make a good employee. And then also, if the person maybe isn't the right fit, going through that process will clearly identify what bits, you know, they're struggling with. You know,
you mentioned the interview process. You spoke a little bit about being upfront about the challenges of the business. Now everybody's going to have challenges in the business, right? Like that's just a common thing. Every single business has challenges.
Correct. Yes.
However, one thing I do want to bring to the table at the moment, because it's a mindset thing, saying, oh, well, I can't find good people. And if you've churned through 7 people in the last 10 months or whatever it is, then chances are those issues that you're having in the business are not being recognized by you as a leader. So actually acknowledging that it's not the people that you're bringing in that's the problem.
Yes.
It's definitely you, and it's definitely the business and what's going on at the top end, in order to, you know, not manage the chaos that is essentially fueling that revolving door and the people going through it.
Yeah. And there's a really cool thing we haven't talked about yet where you can actually get that information, and it's the exit interview. So if you can actually spend some time or have someone, you know, help with capturing an exit interview, some notes around what was the disappointment in the job or what were the things that they didn't like about the role, because a person who's only been there 3 or 6 months is going to give you a very honest reflection.
Absolutely.
Someone who's been there many years, maybe just will breeze through that and just go, I've had enough and time to move on. But someone who's just been there, they would have had very high hopes initially. That's why they took the job. And they'll be very clear on what the disappointment factors of the job were when they're leaving. And if you get, you know, 3 or 4 of those, you'll start to see some very common points, which will all be the things you just said, Tiff, about what are the problems in the business, what are the frustrations, what is the problem with the management team or the senior team, where they're not really understanding what those problems are and addressing them. So again, it'll actually give you more data and facts that might be a little bit uncomfortable initially to look at, but you know, we certainly know avoiding that problem will just continue the revolving door aspect of trying to find a great person. You know, it just will continue.
I love that. Nothing good comes from comfort, I think.
No, exactly. Yeah, and we talked about awareness. You know,
never come from someone just chilling out on the couch.
Yeah. And one of the things we first talked about was awareness, right? In the person we're bringing in, we want to know how self-aware they are. But it's no good them being self-aware if we're not self-aware, because they'll quickly notice that, hey, you guys don't really know what's going on in the business. You're not really aware of the problems. And have obviously been raised before, but you're not really willing to listen. You know,
love that. Not really willing to listen. And we've seen lots of clients over the years who have come through the program and completely changed their mindset and capability around this very thing. So it's definitely something to consider. And they're now businesses that have thriving teams, you know, teams that have been there for years and can onboard, you know, new people into the team that are excited and continue to stay. So it's it is a massive factor.
Yeah, I mean, what we're really talking about here is culture, right?
Yes.
How do you create team culture? Well, it really does start with being aware fully of what the current culture is and kind of owning that. Always say, if you don't like the culture, look in the mirror. If you're the owner or the key person, I've had to do that as part of my self-awareness journey. Was getting to a point where I was, feeling frustrated or maybe wanting to blame people sometimes. And then someone really coaching me going, look, like, if you don't like what you see out there, well, how long have you been here? And you've been in charge of that environment for how long? Oh, 5 years. Then, well, you've actually created that environment. May not be intentionally, but, now there are some serious problems that you need to address and you need to own those. And you can't fix them on your own. You've got to fix them with the team. There's a bit of pill at first because, you're proud of what you've done. You're proud of the successes, but you've got to acknowledge the failures too, so you can actually make it even better and make it the thing that people really want to enjoy coming to work in that culture, and you're right, there are some fantastic clients that have achieved that. There are some really good examples, and I get to speak with the production manager and the team leads a lot, and you can really notice, the anticipation they have around change and the way that they talk about it compared to sometimes people when they're just on that journey and they're still in that kind of chaos environment and they're still not sure about how to move forward. So yes, it certainly pays dividends, and this culture, there's a saying that where they say culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's a famous saying from Peter Drucker, and it is very true. So if you have great culture, you can get through challenges really, really well. But I say, good culture with a good strategy is like, world class. That's how you get to world class. So, but the culture needs to come first. No point having a strategy that doesn't involve addressing the problems with the culture. These needs to be the first 100%. Step. Yeah. And that'll lead you to these onboarding processes and all these things we've discussed today.
And these are all things that our wonderful coaches like you help our wonderful.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And and again, it's not to do with just factories. It, like you mentioned, how you do it with your team. So we can all share our experience and our journey around how we've created that. Doesn't matter whether it's a team of 2, 20, 100. It doesn't matter size. The connect, the develop, and the support and the recognition are key steps in any team, building any team and building a good culture within that group.
Well, there's a model for you.
There you go. Yeah, I can draw something up and we can make that part of the one of the leadership slides or one of the leadership packs.
Let's do it. You know what, guys? We'll get Nigel to do it and we'll put it in the debrief in the comments section
awesome.
Of the podcast episode.
Excellent. I will do that. Brilliant.
Awesome.
Love creating those things.
Great.
Great, Tiff.
I think we've had a really great discussion today, and I think that there's been a lot of really good points that you've brought up. Guys, if you have any questions at all, drop them in the comments section on our blog, on the podcast blog. If you're watching this on YouTube, which you may be, drop it in the comments section. Or if this is a short that you're watching on social media, let us know how you found it.
Thanks, Tiff. You've been an awesome host. Thank you for helping me. It's only my second podcast, so I'm still finding my feet, but it's been enjoyable. Great conversation.
Awesome. All right, guys, have a great day. Bye. See you next podcast.